Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for patiently following the turbulent love story of LyTuDiep and CEO James. Today, I'm bringing you the next episode, one that even I felt choked up while rewriting. As many of you already know, Diep and James are being cruelly torn apart by James's father. Two people who simply want to be together, yet they're forced into a situation no one would ever wish to face. James has been pushed to the point where he must risk everything to escape his father's suffocating surveillance. No money. No phone. No one to rely on. Only one thing keeps him going: his longing for Diep. In today's episode, we'll follow that desperate escape. Will James be able to outrun the relentless pursuit and make his way back to the woman he loves? Will distance and invisible chains be enough to separate two hearts that refuse to let go? Let's dive into today's episode. And don't forget to leave a comment to support the couple. That morning, the early winter wind sliced through the empty yard in front of the storage house, cold enough to sting the skin. Diep stood alone in the wide open space, watching the tractor driver and the hired workers bending their backs to load the last heavy sacks of produce onto the truck. Each bag weighed dozens of kilos, and lifting them up and down was no different from wrestling. Every trip to the distant storage site and back took more than an hour, yet they still pushed to finish early to stay on schedule. Diep took out the workers' pay and handed it over with both hands, part gratitude, part instruction. "Please let everyone have lunch and rest early, Uncle. I'll be busy this afternoon, so I can't come out to supervise. Please help me record the number of sacks so I can check again tonight." The tractor driver nodded, telling her not to worry. Diep gave him a small smile before turning away. Her shoulders dipped slightly, exhaustion leaking out with every breath, but she still tried to stand firm. Because she knew little Nee was waiting for her. By noon, the air grew even colder. Diep held Nee's hand as they walked along a row of winter clothing shops. Nee squinted against the wind but still skipped ahead into the children's sweater section, excited by everything she saw. The girl hugged a soft wool sweater tightly, in exactly the color she loved most. Her eyes sparkled like two little stars. "Auntie Diep, I like this one." Diep laughed and patted her head. "Alright, if you like it, we'll get it." They picked out a small wool hat and a tiny scarf so Nee wouldn't get cold on morning walks. On the way home, they stopped by the figurine painting stall, the place Nee insisted on visiting every time they came to the market. The moment she saw the shelf of animal figurines, she ran over and grabbed a round, chubby one. "Auntie Diep, I choose this one. It looks like Uncle James." Diep froze for a second. The figurine was adorable, yes, but that one sentence made her heart throb painfully. She forced a smile. "Yeah, it really does." But her eyes stung, the kind of sting only adults understand, while the child in front of her remained blissfully innocent. Nee hugged the figurine to her chest, whispering as if afraid someone might take it. "When I miss Uncle James, I'll look at this so I won't be sad." The words tightened something in Diep's throat. She bent down and placed a gentle hand on Nee's shoulder, trying to comfort her. "Alright, we'll keep it." James had been gone for many days. No messages. No calls. No sign he was safe. And that silence was what frightened Diep more than anything else. That night, the little house glowed softly under the warm yellow lights. Diep stood in the kitchen, stirring a pan of fragrant fried rice, the smell of butter, eggs, and crispy onions blending into the air. Even though her shoulders felt as heavy as stones, she still pushed through to cook Nee's favorite meal. Nee sat on her small chair, legs swinging because of the cold. When Diep placed the bowl in front of her, the girl looked up with a sleepy smile, eyes drooping but still trying her best to eat obediently. Diep fed her spoon by spoon, gently wiping her lips whenever a grain of rice stuck. Her fingers brushed the child's warm cheek, and her heart softened without meaning to. After dinner, Diep prepared warm water to bathe Nee. Steam rose in a gentle haze, wrapping the two of them in a strangely peaceful cocoon. She washed Nee's hair, scrubbed her back softly, then wrapped her in a towel, drying every tiny cold finger once they were done. Nee rubbed her eyes, her sleepy voice barely a whisper. "Auntie Diep. I miss Uncle James." Diep froze instantly. Her whole body turned rigid. For a moment, it felt like something grabbed her heart from the inside, squeezing so tightly she could barely breathe. She pressed her lips together and simply pulled Nee into her arms. The answer stuck in her throat. She was afraid that if she spoke, she would burst into tears right in front of the child. After putting Nee to sleep, Diep pulled the blanket over her, stroked her hair, then stepped outside the room. Suddenly, the house felt bigger, colder, and the silence so deep she could hear the wind outside the yard. She washed the dishes. The icy water stung her hands, but she barely noticed. She washed and washed, scrubbed and scrubbed, as if trying to scrub away the anxiety gnawing at her chest. She hung clothes on the line, put away Nee's toys, swept the floor, arranged the dining table. Moving from one task to the next without resting even a minute. But in the quiet space between each task, her worry surged back, stronger every time. Every time she set something down, her eyes drifted to her phone on the shelf. The screen remained dark. No messages. No missed calls. Not a single sign from James. She had called him, who knows how many times. Hundreds, maybe more. But all she received was cold, lifeless silence. In her most exhausted moment, Diep leaned against the kitchen counter, eyes closed. She pictured James standing at the doorway, shirt wrinkled from travel, soft smile like always, his familiar low voice. "I'm sorry. I was just caught up with something." The image was so vivid she almost stepped forward to open the door. But it was just an illusion. The illusion of someone who had waited so long she was starting to break. Diep placed a hand over her chest, feeling each heavy thud of her heart. She whispered, reminding herself, forcing herself to stay upright. "Tomorrow. I have to go see Mr. Fat. I have to find James." Her voice was soft, barely louder than a breath of wind. But it was the strongest resolve she had left. While Diep and little Nee waited at home, counting every hour, every minute for a sign of him. Hundreds of kilometers away, in an unfamiliar corner of Cambodia. Inside a deserted mansion surrounded by dense forest, James was still being held captive. The house was huge but lifeless, stripped of anything that resembled human warmth. Only the dry, hollow footsteps of patrolling guards echoed through the halls. Day by day, the four walls seemed to close in, squeezing the air out of him. The security cameras swept across every corner, every hallway, as if saying, "You're not escaping." But James was different. He refused to give up. He never would. For days, he observed. Watched until he memorized every step, every habit, every blink of the men guarding him. Then, something made his heart jolt. A 90-second gap during shift change. The camera rotated a beat slower. And in that brief sliver of time, a blind spot appeared. A tiny shadow wedged between two overlapping patches of darkness. One careless moment. One slow rotation of machinery. But to someone desperate for a way out, that tiny flaw was the only light he had. James clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. His pulse hammered. Every muscle tightened like a drawn bow. This was the only chance, and maybe the last. The second the camera turned away, James burst out. Not running, but launching forward. Fast, sharp, fierce, like a caged predator finally seeing a crack in the bars. He pressed himself against the icy stone wall, sliding along the vines in careful, silent steps. The final stretch of the wall was nearly 2 meters tall. But with the fire burning in his chest, it felt like nothing more than an obstacle he had to overcome. James gathered strength, and jumped. His fingers caught the edge of the wall. His body swung over and crashed down on the outside with a painful thud. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. He didn't even feel the pain shooting through his leg. He just ran. Ran on instinct. Ran with whatever energy he had left. Ran for Diep. Ran for little me. Ran for the last scrap of freedom. But this place was strange. Too strange. No roads. No houses. No lights. No sign of life anywhere. It was as if the whole forest was cut off from the world. James tried to orient himself, but his head began to spin. The drug still lingering in his system blurred his vision. And right then, shouts tore through the night. He's escaped. Catch him now. The sound hit him like ice water down his spine. Flashlights slashed through the darkness like knives. Footsteps thundered behind him. Branches snapped, dogs barked in the distance, a suffocating symphony of pursuit. James gritted his teeth and plunged into the bushes. Thorns scraped his skin, carving long lines across his arms, but he didn't stop. His breaths were ragged, burning, yet his legs kept pushing forward as if someone was dragging him along. He had to get away. Just a few more meters. But then, thud. A heavy, echoing sound split the night. The ground beneath him vanished. James slipped. His body plunged straight down into a deep, pitch-black hole, too fast to grab onto anything. His head slammed hard against the edge. A flash of blinding white tore across his vision. Then everything went dark. His entire body fell into nothingness. Breath fading. And the last image flickering through his mind was Diep holding me at the doorway of their home. James lost consciousness, with his dream of freedom still unfinished. The darkness in the forest was thick, heavy, almost as if it wanted to swallow every sound whole. But the rustling and pounding footsteps shattered that silence. Flashlights swept down into the pit where James had fallen, bright enough to pierce through his swollen eyelids. One guard shouted, his voice ripping through the night. "He's here. Down in the hole." Another rushed over, panic in his tone. "Hurry. If the boss finds out he slipped the perimeter, we're dead." They jumped down and dragged James up like hauling a broken tree trunk. He was completely unconscious. Arms limp, clothes torn to shreds, dirt smeared across his face, blood soaking into a dark patch on his shirt. Forest thorns clung to his clothes, scratching long jagged lines across his skin. His entire body hung lifeless, breathing so faint it was barely there. They carried him back in total panic, running as if transporting a ticking bomb to the mansion. The news of James's escape traveled fast. It hadn't even reached a second person before his father, Mr. Fat, exploded. He slammed a glass hard onto the table. The shattering echoed through the large room like metal scraping, cold, sharp, and threatening. His face flushed red, veins bulging across his forehead. "Call the doctor. Now. If anything happens to him, you're all dead." No one dared breathe. Meanwhile, James was placed onto a bed. His body drenched in sweat, breath shallow, lips turning purple. The doctor examined him quickly. Weak pulse, heavy bruising everywhere, signs of a severe head impact. He sank into a deep coma, completely unaware of the chaos around him. In a foggy white dream, James saw Diep and Little Nie standing in a field of golden sunlight. Both reached out for him, as if wanting to pull him back into their arms. The wind lifted Diep's hair gently, her smile soft but distant, drifting farther and farther out of reach. Nie called out in a tiny, trembling voice. "Uncle James, come back to me." James tried to run to them, but his legs felt chained. Every step forward dragged him several steps back. The peaceful dream twisted into a heart-tearing ache. He woke up after an unknown amount of time. Bright white light hit his eyes, forcing him to blink rapidly. The smell of antiseptic stung his nose, mixed with the scent of sweat and dried blood. His arms were wrapped in bandages from wrist to elbow. His leg too. His head pulsed violently, the pain so sharp it made him nauseous. He tried to sit up, but a bolt of agony shot down his spine, forcing him to bite his lip until it bled. Before he could gather his senses, his father's cold, metallic voice cut through the room. "Watch him closely. If he escapes again, I'll bury you all alive." He wasn't speaking to James. He was speaking to the guards, all bowing with their faces to the floor, sweat dripping onto the tiles. Some were still bruised from being punished for their earlier mistake. None dared react. They only prayed James wouldn't try anything reckless again. From that day on, the mansion became a steel prison. Double-locked windows. A triple-locked main door. Cameras that never stopped rotating. Extra guards in the hallways. James was given no second chance. Every day, the doctor changed his bandages, checked his pulse, examined his swelling. Each time the bandages came off, James could feel every torn layer of skin, every burning sting from arm to shoulder. He was completely trapped. Absolutely powerless. And he knew it. He knew all too well. He would never escape this place alone. But in his exhausted eyes, there remained one thing no one could strip from him. Hope. The last fragile thread he still clung to, thin as a strand of silk hanging over a cliff, still burned quietly inside him. Hope to return to Diep. Hope to hold Little Nie in his arms just once more. Hope to survive. The checkup that day felt as if an invisible boulder had been dropped into the room. The air was so thick, so heavy, that James felt if he inhaled just a little deeper, his chest might split from the pressure. The bedroom was large but icy cold, spotless to the point of being soulless, no different from an operating room. White walls. Cold floor. Thick curtains drawn so tightly that even the light slipping through was pale, like the dying breath of late afternoon. The silence stretched on, long enough for James to hear every tick of the clock climbing across the wall. The door opened. The doctor walked in, middle-aged, careful, dressed in a crisp white coat. His gloved hands carried a medical kit, his expression blank, as if he'd long grown used to treating patients held captive. James leaned back against the bed frame. Even that slight movement made him wince, a sharp jolt of pain racing down his spine. Bandages wrapped him from shoulder to wrist on the left arm. The right arm was mottled with bruises. He looked like someone who had just crawled out of a horrific accident. The doctor leaned closer and began removing the layers of bandage. The smell of antiseptic hit the air instantly, so sharp and burning that James had to blink repeatedly to stay conscious. Even the smallest movement made his shoulders stiffen. His body was nearly spent, but his mind was still awake. Awake enough to know, this might be the only chance he would ever get. As the doctor bent lower, James stared into the empty air ahead of him for a few seconds. His breathing shook, not from pain but from fear, and hope. He gathered every ounce of strength left in his battered body. "Please, help me." Just 6 words. But they weighed as much as his entire life. His left hand, the only one he could still move, trembled as he slipped something into the doctor's palm. A small piece of paper, folded 4 times. Damp with sweat, wrinkled from being clenched in his fist for days. He had poured what little soul he had left into this moment. The doctor flinched slightly. He looked down at his hand. His fingers stiffened. James exhaled shakily, heart hammering, and forced himself to speak, his voice raspy, weak, but each word carved into the air with painful clarity. "Inside is CEO Hung's number. Call him. Tell him I am being held. Please." Each word drained him further. But still, James gave everything he had. The doctor didn't move. For a long time. Long enough for James to hear the pounding of his own heartbeat, heavy, fast, like the drums of someone about to enter a life-or-death battle. The doctor looked at James. Not cold. Not warm. Neither hostile nor sympathetic. Just a neutral, unreadable gaze, the kind that made it impossible to tell whether he was afraid, understanding, or considering something dangerous. James held his breath. His entire body froze. Finally, the doctor said nothing. No nod. No shake of the head. No expression at all. He simply lifted his hand and slowly slipped the folded note into the pocket of his white coat. A small gesture. But for James, it was everything. He wanted to ask. Wanted confirmation. Wanted to know if the man would truly help. But he didn't dare speak. One wrong question, and everything could collapse. He lay still, cold sweat creeping down his temples, while his mind churned violently. Would the doctor really call Hung? Did he have the courage to defy James's father? Or would that slip of paper be handed straight to the most dangerous man in this mansion? No one knew. The room returned to silence. A silence so cold even the wind outside didn't dare slip through the cracks. Somewhere far away, Diep and Littleny still waited. Unaware that James was gambling his entire life just to send a single plea for help. James, bruised, watched, isolated, clung desperately to that last shred of hope. A hope as small as a flame in a storm. But still, the only hope he had left. Would the doctor call Hung? Would that piece of paper save James, or destroy him? The drama isn't over. Not even close. See you in the next part.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình đang đưa tới với mọi người video về câu chuyện tình yêu của James và Diệp nha. Tắt cái đoạn này đi. Hôm nay thì mình làm video cũng hơi muộn một tí do mình ăn sáng muộn này. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem video. Tạm biệt mọi người nha.